Go ahead, Lily. Choose one. That's why they came. Adrian Vance kept his voice low and even the way he spoke when a decision had already been made in his mind, and he simply needed the world to catch up. 5 women stood in a neat line at the far end of the receiving room, each one polished, each one smiling, each one holding a leather folder against her chest like a small shield. They had all come for the same position. Nanny to Lily Vance, the adopted 6-year-old daughter of one of the wealthiest men on the East Coast. It was the kind of job people whispered about. A salary larger than most family incomes, a private suite inside a house that looked like a museum, and a letter of recommendation afterward that could open any door in the country. The 5 women knew exactly what they were standing in line for. That was why their smiles did not waver. "Go ahead," Adrian said again, more gently this time. "You can talk to them first if you want, then you tell me which one you like." Lily looked at the women. One of them gave a small wave with just her fingertips. Another lowered herself slightly at the knees so she would seem shorter, softer, less like a stranger in an expensive coat. They had all done this before. They knew how to make themselves small for a child, but Lily shook her head. "No," Adrian looked down at her. "No, what? I don't want to talk to them." A short silence settled over the room. Then the first woman stepped forward with a warm, well-practiced expression, the kind that had probably charmed dozens of nervous parents over the years. "Hello, Lily," she said softly. "My name is Margaret. I heard you love horses. I used to take care of a little girl who had her own pony. Maybe one day I could teach you to ride." Lily looked at her, but nothing in her small face changed. "No, thank you." A second woman moved forward smoothly, as if she had been waiting for her turn. "I speak 3 languages," she said with a bright smile. "French, Spanish, and a little Italian. I could teach you all of them before you're even 10 years old. Wouldn't that be wonderful?" Lily shook her head again. "No, ma'am." A third woman crouched down to Lily's level and tilted her head kindly. "Why don't you come stand with us for just a minute, sweetheart? You can ask us anything you like, then you can decide." The women spoke gently, kindly, the way people do when they have learned exactly how to win a child over. They shifted a little closer together, forming a soft half-circle around the little girl, as if drawing her into a warm net she could not quite see. From the doorway, an older woman watched the whole scene without a word. Cora Bennett had cooked in the Vance house for 11 years. She was not supposed to be standing there. The kitchen was 3 rooms away and there was bread rising on the counter, but something had pulled her to the edge of that hallway, and now she stood there with a flour-dusted towel still in her hands, careful not to step over the threshold. This was not her place. She knew that better than anyone in the house. Lily looked at the 5 women in their pale coats and clever smiles. Then she turned. Without asking permission, without explaining herself, she walked straight past all of them, across the wide, polished floor, and the closer she got to the doorway, the faster she walked, until the last few steps became a run. She threw her arms around the old cook and held on tight. "I choose her," Lily said. Cora froze. "I choose Miss Cora," the little girl said again, her face pressed into the apron she had known her whole short life. Behind her, the air in the room seemed to change. The 5 women glanced at one another, and this time their smiles did not return in quite the same shape. Adrian walked toward them slowly. "Lily," he said, keeping his tone patient, "Miss Bennett isn't one of the choices." "Yes, she is," Lily said, taking the old woman's hand and holding it the way a person holds something they are afraid will be taken away. "She's my choice." One of the women let out a soft breath and stepped forward again, but this time her smile had thinned at the edges. "Lily, honey," she said gently, "Miss Cora cooks. She works very hard in the kitchen all day. She wouldn't have any time to be your nanny." Lily did not let go of the cook's hand. She looked up at the woman with eyes that did not look much like a 6-year-old's eyes at all. "You just got here," she said quietly. "You don't even know her." The woman's smile held, but barely. "We don't need to know her, sweetheart. We're just trying to explain how things work in a house like this." Another of the 5 leaned slightly toward Lily, lowering her voice as if she were sharing a secret meant only for the child's ears. "Sometimes," she said softly, "people who work in big houses get very attached to the children. They do it because they want to keep their jobs. It isn't always honest, you see. A real nanny is different." A third woman nodded in agreement and added in the same gentle, reasonable tone, "We only met you today, Lily, so we have no reason to say anything but the truth." But in homes like this one, the staff sometimes forget their place. They start acting like family. That can be very confusing for a little girl. They all spoke softly, kindly, reasonably, the way grown-ups speak when they want to sound right. Lily listened without interrupting. Her small hand stayed wrapped around Cora's worn fingers the entire time. Then, when the last woman had finished, she spoke very calmly. "That's not true." She looked from one face to the next, her eyes serious in a way that made the room go quiet. You just came here today. You don't know Miss Cora, you don't know me, but you're already saying bad things about her. One of the women tried to smile again. We're not saying bad things, sweetheart. We're only explaining. You said she's pretending, Lily said, but she's not pretending. She takes care of me when nobody is watching. No one spoke. Lily continued, her voice still soft, still clear. When I had a bad dream and woke up crying, she came and sat with me and nobody told her to. When I didn't want to eat, she made me little pancakes shaped like animals and nobody told her to do that either. When I was scared during the big storm, she stayed in my room until morning. She did all of that when nobody was paying her to. She looked at the 5 women again, and something in her steady gaze made the polished women shift their weight. You just got here, she said, and you already told me she's pretending and forgetting her place. That means you don't tell the truth, and if you say bad things about somebody you don't even know, then later when you work here, maybe you'll say bad things about me too, or about my daddy, and maybe you won't tell the truth then either. Adrian Vance felt something move quietly in his chest as he listened. He had walked into that room expecting to manage a small problem the way he managed everything else, swiftly and without complication. He had not expected his daughter to dismantle 5 professionals with nothing but the plain truth. Lily squeezed Cora's hand. I don't want a nanny who lies, she said. I want the one who takes care of me. One of the women straightened, plainly offended now. Mr. Vance, she said, her voice cooling, the child is far too young to understand professional boundaries. Lily looked up at her and answered quietly, I understand who is kind. Adrian closed his eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again. When he spoke, his voice returned to its usual register, calm but firm, the voice of a man taking the wheel of a conversation that had drifted somewhere he did not intend. Lily, he said, Miss Bennett is the cook. She isn't trained as a nanny. She can't take this position. You need to choose one of the 5 women I brought here for you. Lily did not release Cora's hand. I'm not choosing them, she said. You will choose, Adrian replied, gently but without room for argument. I'll give you until tomorrow morning, but you will pick one of them. Lily nodded slowly. She did not move away from Cora. She only said one more thing, very quietly, almost to herself. I already chose the one who stayed. The 5 women exchanged a long look. Whatever ease had been in the room when they arrived was gone now. Cora finally found her voice, though it came out barely above a whisper. Lily, baby, she murmured, bending down so her mouth was near the child's ear. You shouldn't say things like that. It isn't right. Your father knows what's best. But Lily shook her head against the old woman's apron, stubborn as winter. And from across the room, Adrian watched the cook he had employed for 11 years, a woman whose face he could barely have described an hour ago, hold his daughter as though the child were made of glass and gold both at once. He found to his own quiet surprise that he could not look away. The 5 women gathered their folders. There was nothing more to be done that afternoon, and they were too experienced to keep pressing a closed door. One by one, they thanked Mr. Vance, told him they looked forward to his decision, and let themselves be shown to the front hall where their coats waited. Their heels clicked softly across the marble, and then the heavy door closed behind them and the house went quiet. Adrian turned back to find Cora already trying to slip away toward the kitchen, Lily's hand still locked around hers. Miss Bennett, he said. Cora stopped and turned, lowering her eyes the way staff did when an employer addressed them directly. Yes, sir. Please go back to your duties for now. His voice was even professional, the voice he used for instructions. And try not to encourage the child about something that isn't going to happen. Cora understood exactly what he meant. Don't let her believe this is possible. Don't make tomorrow harder than it already is. Yes, sir, she said quietly. But Lily looked up at her father with that steady gaze of hers. She's not encouraging me, she said. I decided by myself. Adrian crouched down so he was level with his daughter, something he did not often do. Lily, I know you love Miss Cora. I'm not asking you to stop loving her. I'm asking you to be reasonable. She has a job already. She cooks for the whole house. A nanny is a different thing. How is it different? He opened his mouth, then found he did not have a clean answer ready. Because that's how a household works, he said finally. Everyone has their place. Lily considered this with the seriousness she always gave to things that did not make sense to her. But I didn't used to live here, she said. I lived somewhere else with a different family, and then I came here, and now this is my place. So people can change places. That means Miss Cora can change places too. Adrian had built a career out of winning arguments. He had sat across tables from men who ran banks and men who ran cities, and he had rarely walked away the loser. But there was something about the plain logic of a 6-year-old that left no opening, no angle, nothing to push against. He stood up slowly. Go upstairs and wash for dinner, he said. We'll talk more tomorrow. Lily nodded. She finally let go of Cora's hand, but at the doorway she turned around. I'm still choosing you, Miss Cora, she announced, and then she ran up the stairs 2 at a time. When the small footsteps had faded, Cora let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for an hour. I'm sorry, sir, she said. I never said a word to her about any of this. I would never put ideas in her head. I know my place in this house. I know, Adrian said, and he did know. That was almost the strangest part. He looked at the woman standing in front of him, gray hair pinned back, flower still on the front of her apron, hands that had clearly worked hard for a very long time. How long have you been with us? 11 years this past autumn, sir, since before Miss Lily came. And before that? I cooked for a family in Providence for 9 years, and before that a hotel kitchen in Worcester when I was young. She said it simply, without pride or apology, the way a person states facts about a life they have already lived. Adrian nodded. He almost let the conversation end there. It would have been the easy thing. Instead, he heard himself ask, when Lily had that fever last winter, the bad one, were you the one who stayed with her? Something flickered across Cora's face. Yes, sir. That wasn't your job. No, sir. Then why did you do it? She hesitated, and for the first time he saw that she did not want to answer. The other questions she had answered without pause, but this one she held for a moment, as if it cost something to say out loud. Finally, she did, because no child should wake up sick and frightened in the dark with nobody there. She smoothed her apron with both hands, a small, nervous gesture. I had a little one of my own, sir, a long time ago. She didn't grow up. After that, I just cooked and kept to myself and tried not to think about it too much. But a sick child crying in the night, well, some things you can't walk past. The words settled into the wide hallway and did not move. Adrian stood very still. He had asked the question expecting a short, deflecting answer the kind staff always gave. Instead, he had been handed something raw and true, and he did not quite know what to do with the weight of it. Thank you, Miss Bennet, he said quietly. That will be all for now. That night, the Vance house felt larger than usual. It was a strange thing, how a house could change without a single wall being moved. The same long corridors, the same tall windows full of dark winter sky, the same thick carpets that swallowed every footstep. And yet something invisible had shifted, and now nothing seemed to sit quite where it used to. Lily sat at the small table in the breakfast room, her legs swinging above the floor, her dinner barely touched. The cook on duty that evening had prepared roast chicken, buttered carrots, and warm rolls, the kind of meal meant to comfort a child. Lily pushed a carrot slowly across her plate with the tines of her fork. You've hardly eaten anything, said the house manager, Mrs. Prout, who had worked in grand homes for 30 years and knew when something was wrong in one. I'm not very hungry, Lily said. From the doorway, Cora watched quietly, a dish towel folded over her arm. She was not supposed to be there during dinner service. That was not part of her duties. But she had noticed the child eat almost nothing at lunch, and something in her would not let her stay in the kitchen. Adrian came in a few minutes later, loosening his tie. He had spent the afternoon on calls about numbers large enough to move markets, conversations he understood completely. But when he saw Lily at the table, small and quiet and not eating, that same unfamiliar discomfort returned, the one he had felt in the receiving room. How much has she eaten? He asked. Not much, sir, Mrs. Prout answered carefully. Adrian pulled out the chair across from his daughter and sat. Lily, you need to eat. I'm not hungry, she said again. He studied her for a moment. Is this about this afternoon? Lily looked down at her plate and said nothing. In business, silence was a tool he wielded with great skill. With Lily, silence felt like a wall he had no idea how to climb. Not eating won't change my decision, he said calmly. She looked up then. Her eyes were not angry, not tearful. They were simply steady. I know. Then why aren't you eating? Lily thought about the question the way she thought about everything, seriously, turning it over before she spoke. Because when nobody listens to me, my stomach feels closed. Mrs. Prout suddenly found something on the silverware that required her attention. Adrian had no answer for that. After a moment, Lily picked up her fork and took a small bite, as though she understood that this was the only part of the situation she could control. Whether she ate or didn't, slept or didn't, changed her mind or didn't. Later, after her bath, Cora came up to help Lily into bed, though no one had asked her to. She turned down the blanket and tested the room's warmth out of long habit. You don't have to do this, Cora said softly as Lily climbed under the covers. One of the new ladies could put you to bed tomorrow. I don't want one of the new ladies tomorrow, Lily said, hugging a worn, stuffed rabbit to her chest. Cora sighed. Your father thinks they're more suitable, baby. Lily considered the word. Suitable means they look right to him, she said. Not that they take care of me. Cora paused, the blanket half tucked in her hands. Where on earth did you learn to talk like that? I listen when grown-ups talk, Lily said simply. They just think I don't understand. Cora almost smiled, but the smile faded before it finished. She sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. Lily looked up at her with those careful eyes. Miss Cora, she said, if I choose you tomorrow and Daddy says no again, will you still be here? I work here, baby, so yes, I'll still be here. That's not what I mean. Lily's voice was very small now. I mean, will you still be mine? The question was so quiet, so careful, that it felt like something fragile being placed into the old woman's hands. Cora was quiet for a long moment. I haven't belonged to anybody, she said at last, in a very long time. You can belong to me, Lily said, and I can belong to you. Cora closed her eyes briefly. Lily, she said, her voice thick but controlled, people like me don't usually get to belong to people like you. That's just the way the world is built. Lily frowned at the ceiling. That's a bad rule. Yes, Cora said quietly, smoothing the child's hair. Sometimes it is. When Lily was finally asleep, Adrian came up to her room. He did not usually handle bedtime. That had always been someone else's responsibility. But tonight he stood in the doorway for a moment before the soft glow of the hall lamp, watching the shape of his daughter under the blanket, the rabbit tucked beneath her arm. In the chair beside the bed sat Cora, a book closed in her lap, simply keeping watch the way a person does when they cannot quite bring themselves to leave. Miss Bennet, he said softly. She rose at once. Oh, I'm sorry, sir, she was restless, I only meant to. You don't have to stand up every time I walk into a room, Adrian said. It came out more tired than commanding. Cora hesitated. I'm not sure I know how not to, sir. He leaned against the doorframe and looked at his sleeping daughter for a long moment. Earlier today, he said quietly, I thought she was making an emotional decision, a child's decision, the kind you wait out until they forget about it. Cora said nothing. But I've been thinking about it all evening, he went on, and I don't think it's emotional at all. I think she's being practical. She picked the person who shows up, the one who stays when she's sick, who notices when she won't eat, who comes when she's scared in the dark. He paused. That isn't a child being silly, that's a child being right. Cora looked down at the book in her hands. Children always know who shows up, sir, she said. They don't have all the words for it yet, but they always know. Adrian was quiet for a while. Then he said something that surprised even himself. When I was a boy about her age, I had a nanny. Her name was Alina. She raised me, really, more than my parents did. They were always traveling, always at some event. Alina was the one who was there. He stopped. When I turned 11, my father decided I was too old for a nanny. I came home from school one day and she was simply gone. No goodbye, no explanation. That was how things were done in our house. Cora's eyes lifted to his face. I'm sorry, sir, that's a hard thing for a child. I didn't understand it then, he said. I think I understand it now. He looked at Lily. I learned that day that the people who love you in a house like this are considered temporary, replaceable. You don't get attached because attachment is inconvenient. His jaw tightened. I built my whole life on clean lines after that. Titles, positions, contracts, everyone in their place. It made me very successful. It's a fine way to run a business, sir, Cora said gently. Yes, he almost laughed. It's a terrible way to raise a child. The two of them stood in the soft light, an unlikely pair, the billionaire and the cook, both looking at the small girl who had set all of this in motion without raising her voice once. The next morning came with bright sun reflecting off the lawn. Adrian had not slept well. He stood at the window of his study with a cup of coffee he kept forgetting to drink, watching a groundskeeper clear the last of the frost from the front walk. He kept returning to the question Cora had answered the night before, because no child should wake up sick and frightened in the dark with nobody there. He had built his fortune on clear definitions. Titles mattered, positions mattered, lines mattered. If everyone stayed in their roles, the whole machine ran smoothly. But Lily did not understand lines. She understood presence, and he was beginning to suspect that on this particular subject, his 6-year-old had a clearer view of the world than he did. At 7:30, Mrs. Prout knocked lightly on the study door. Good morning, sir. The candidates have arrived again. Of course they had. Professional people were always punctual when opportunity was involved. I'll be down in a moment, Adrian said. Upstairs, Cora was sitting on the edge of Lily's bed, brushing the child's hair into 2 neat sections before braiding. You don't have to braid it so tight, Lily said. If I don't braid it tight, it won't stay neat all day, Cora replied. I don't care if it's neat. I do, Cora said softly. When you walk out into that room full of people, I want you to look like a child who is loved and cared for. That matters, baby, even when it shouldn't, it does. Lily was quiet a moment. I am loved and cared for, she said. Cora's hands paused in the braid, then continued. Miss Cora, Lily said, I'm going to choose you again today. The old woman closed her eyes for just a breath. "I know, baby," she said. "I know you are." "Your father may be very angry," Cora said carefully, tying off the second braid with a pale blue ribbon. Lily shrugged a little. "He's not really angry. He's just not listening yet." Cora almost smiled at that, not listening yet. As though listening were a season that would arrive on its own, like spring after a long winter. "You have to be respectful when you talk to him," she said. "I will," Lily replied. "But I'm not changing my answer." Cora turned the child gently by the shoulders so they were face to face. "Why are you so sure?" she asked quietly. She genuinely wanted to know. She had spent 11 years in this house teaching herself not to want things, and now a 6-year-old was unraveling all of that careful work in a single week. Lily looked at her as though the answer were the simplest thing in the world. "Because you stayed." Cora felt something break and mend at the same time inside her chest. Downstairs, Adrian stood near the cold fireplace when Lily came into the room. The 5 women had been seated this time, their folders arranged on the low table in front of them. They rose when the child entered, smiles ready. Cora did not come all the way in. She stopped at the doorway where staff stood, not where family stood, close enough that Lily could see her but no closer. "Good morning, Lily," the first woman said brightly. "Did you have a good sleep? Did you think about everything we talked about?" "Yes, ma'am," Lily said politely. "I thought about it." "Would you like to sit with us for a few minutes?" another asked, "before you decide?" "No, thank you, ma'am." Adrian watched his daughter. He noticed she was not nervous, not upset, not defiant. She looked the way she looked when she had finished a puzzle and knew exactly where the last piece belonged. "Lily," he said, "have you made your decision?" "Yes, sir." The room seemed to hold its breath. "All right," Adrian said. "Go ahead." Lily did not walk toward the 5 women. She turned in the opposite direction and crossed the floor straight to the doorway, where she reached up and took Cora's hand. "I choose Miss Cora," she said. "I chose her yesterday and I choose her again today." One of the women let out a small, frustrated breath. Another tried to keep her smile and failed. The woman in the gray suit, who seemed to be their unofficial leader, spoke, her voice still controlled but sharper now. "Lily, you're making this decision based on feelings. A nanny has to be trained, educated. She has to prepare you for school, for society, for the kind of life your father is building for you. That's what we do." "That's what we're for." Lily listened politely, then asked, "Did any of you stay all night with a child who was sick, even when nobody was paying you to?" The women exchanged quick glances. "That is what we are paid to do," one of them said. Lily shook her head slightly. "Miss Cora did it when nobody was paying her to." Another woman tried a softer approach, crouching down with a kind smile. "Lily, we could teach you so many wonderful things: languages, music, painting. We could take you to museums and concerts. We could give you every opportunity in the world." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds nice." The women relaxed just slightly. "But when I'm scared at night," Lily said, "I don't need a museum. I need the person who comes when I call." No one spoke after that. Lily turned to her father. "You told me to choose," she said. "So I did. I choose the person who takes care of me when nobody is looking." Adrian looked at his daughter, and in that moment he saw clearly what he had not let himself see before. Lily was not choosing between 5 accomplished nannies and a cook. She was choosing between 5 strangers and the one person in the entire house who had never once left her alone when she was frightened. "Could you give us a moment, please?" he said to the 5 women. They stood, gathered their folders, and filed out with polite expressions that did not reach their eyes. The gray-suited woman paused at the door. "Mr. Vance," she said quietly, "if I may speak frankly, a child who learns she can override her father's decision by holding her breath and digging in her heels will learn to override a great many other things. We see it all the time in these households. The staff become too important. The lines blur. It does the child no favors in the long run." Adrian looked at her for a long moment. "Thank you for your time," he said. It was not an answer, and she knew it. She inclined her head and left. When the front door closed, only 3 people remained in the wide, quiet room. Adrian walked slowly to the low table where the women had left nothing behind but the faint impression of their folders. He turned to face Cora, who stood very still in the doorway with Lily's hand in hers. "Lily," he said, "go sit on the sofa for a minute. I need to talk to Miss Cora." Lily obeyed, climbing onto the long sofa with her stuffed rabbit, her eyes moving carefully between the 2 adults, missing nothing. "Miss Bennett," Adrian said, "I'm going to ask you something, and this time I need the real answer, not the careful one, not the answer you think I want to hear." Cora's hands folded in front of her apron. "Yes, sir. If I offered you this position, officially, Lily's nanny with full responsibility for her, would you take it?" Cora's eyes widened. "Sir, I don't think that would be proper. I'm the cook. I haven't any training. There are people who know about schools and schedules, and..." "That's not what I asked," Adrian said gently. "I asked if you would take care of her." She looked over at Lily sitting on the sofa watching them, listening to every word with the whole of her small attention. "I've been taking care of her," Cora said quietly, "for years now in the ways that don't show up on paper." "I know," Adrian said. "I went through the household reports last night. You're the one who knows which nights she can't sleep. You're the one who noticed she was getting sick before the doctor did. You're the one who makes those little animal pancakes when she won't eat. You're the one she runs to when she's afraid." He paused. "You've been doing the job for years, you just didn't have the title." Cora's hands tightened on the front of her apron. "That may be," she said softly. "But the title is a different thing entirely. If you give me that position, people will talk, sir. They'll say I used the child to climb. They'll say I forgot my place. They'll say there's something wrong about it." "They probably will," Adrian agreed. "I've lived a long time," Cora went on. "I know how the world works. People like me don't move into positions like that in houses like this, not without everyone deciding something improper is going on." Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised even himself. "I think something improper was already going on," he said. "I just couldn't see it until my daughter pointed at it. The most important person in my child's daily life was a woman I had officially listed as kitchen staff. The person she trusted most in the world had to stand in a doorway instead of sitting at a table. That's the thing that was wrong, Miss Bennett, not this." Cora felt tears rise behind her eyes, but she did not let them fall. "I never needed a title to care about her, sir." "I know," Adrian said, "but sometimes a title is how the world recognizes what the heart already knows. And more than that," he glanced toward Lily, "a title is a promise. If I write it down, if I make it real, then no one can decide one morning that you're unnecessary and make you disappear. The way my father did with Alina, I won't have my daughter learn what I learned." He looked back at the cook. "So I'll ask you one last time. If I offer you the position, will you stay?" Cora looked at Lily. The little girl did not speak. She only looked back, her small face full of hope and certainty, and a trust so complete it could break a person's heart or remake it. "Yes," Cora said softly, "I'll stay." For a moment, Lily did not move, as if she did not quite trust what she had heard. She looked from Cora to her father and back again, making sure this was not one of those grown-up conversations that quietly reversed itself later behind closed doors. "You mean really stay?" she asked. "For real?" Cora nodded, her voice steadying. "Yes, baby, for real." Lily slid off the sofa and crossed the room slowly, as though the moment were too important to run through. When she reached Cora, she wrapped both arms around the old woman's waist and pressed her face into the worn apron and held on. Adrian watched them, and for the first time since this had all begun, he felt something in his chest loosen. Not because the situation had become simpler. It hadn't. But because for the first time it had become clear. "If we're going to do this," he said after a moment, "we're going to do it properly. Miss Bennett, you'll no longer be listed as kitchen staff. You'll be Lily's full-time nanny and primary caregiver. Your salary will be adjusted. Your authority over her meals, her schooling, her routines will be recognized by everyone in this house." Cora stared at him, stunned by the formality of it. By the fact that he was not merely permitting it, but building it a place in the world he understood. "Sir," she said, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Adrian replied. "Just take care of my daughter." Cora looked down at the child holding tight to her waist. "I already do," she said. "Yes," Adrian said. "I know." The news moved through the house the way news always moved through large houses, quietly, without anyone officially announcing it. By dinnertime that evening, every member of the staff knew that Cora Bennett was no longer simply the cook. She was now Miss Cora, Lily's nanny. Some of them were surprised. Some were quietly pleased. A few said nothing at all and watched carefully, because changes in a great house often signaled other changes coming behind them. At dinner, Lily was happier than Adrian had seen her in a long time. She ate everything on her plate, even the green beans. "Slow down," Cora said gently from where she stood at the side of the room, an old habit she had not yet broken. "I'm hungry," Lily said. "That's because you didn't eat enough yesterday," Cora replied. Adrian watched the exchange. It was such a small thing, the way Cora spoke to his daughter, not the careful voice of an employee addressing the master's child, but the easy authority of a person who had the right to care whether the girl ate her vegetables. "Miss Cora," Lily said suddenly, "can you sit with us?" Cora looked immediately to Adrian. She did not move until he nodded. Then she crossed to the end of the long table and sat at the very edge of the chair, her back straight, her hands folded, as if she might be asked to stand again at any moment. Lily pushed the basket of rolls toward her. "You have to eat too." Cora took one small roll. "Thank you, baby." For a few minutes they ate quietly, but the quiet felt different than it had on other nights. Less empty, less formal. As if the room itself was slowly learning the shape of a new arrangement. Later that week, Adrian had a lunch at his club with two business associates and their wives, the kind of social meal that was half business and half reputation, the sort that mattered in ways no one ever wrote down. Somewhere between the second course and the coffee, one of the men asked, easily, "So I hear you were hunting for a new nanny. Find anyone good?" "I did," Adrian said. "From that agency in the city." "No," Adrian said, lifting his water glass. "From my own house." The man frowned. Meaning the person who was already taking care of my daughter is now officially the person taking care of my daughter." One of the wives tilted her head with a polite, puzzled smile. "You promoted someone from inside, from what position?" "She was our cook." There was a small pause at the table, not rude, not openly disapproving. Just the particular silence that falls when people are deciding how to react to something that does not fit their expectations. "Well," one of the men offered carefully, "loyalty in staff is worth a great deal." "Yes," Adrian agreed, "it is." But he did not explain further, because he knew that if he said she's the one who stayed with my daughter through the worst night of her life, the conversation would become uncomfortable for people who preferred to think of care as something that could be hired, scheduled, and replaced. The wife who had asked about the position was not finished. "You'll want to be careful, you know," she said with the gentle certainty of someone offering wisdom. "It's never wise to let staff become too important to a child. It makes the separation so much harder later on. Children grow up, they don't need a nanny forever." Adrian set down his cup. "That's true," he said evenly, "but I'm not planning on a separation." The table moved on to other things, but the woman's words stayed with him on the drive home, turning over in his mind. They don't need a nanny forever. No, he thought, but everyone at every age needs at least one person who chose to stay. That evening when Lily came home from school, she ran straight into the kitchen, forgetting for a moment that Cora no longer spent her whole day there. "I got a gold star in reading," she announced, finding the old woman at the counter slicing apples. "That's because you practiced," Cora said, smiling. "And because you made me read even when I didn't want to," Lily said. "That too," Cora agreed. Lily leaned against the counter and looked up at her with sudden seriousness. "Are you happy?" "About being my nanny?" Cora set down the knife and wiped her hands slowly on her apron. The question deserved a true answer. "Yes," she said, "I'm happy." Lily nodded, satisfied, and reached up to take an apple slice. Through the kitchen doorway, Adrian stood with a folder of work in his hand, having meant to ask Cora about the weekend schedule. He did not interrupt. He simply watched the two of them, the old woman and the child, in the warm light of the kitchen, and felt that the most important thing happening in his house that evening had nothing to do with the folder under his arm. By the second week, the new routine had begun to feel ordinary, and ordinary, Adrian was learning, was a kind of love when it came to children. Every morning Cora sat at the breakfast table with a small notebook, checking Lily's school schedule, packing her lunch, reminding her about spelling words and reading assignments. She walked the child to the car each morning, made sure her scarf was wrapped properly, and always said the same thing before Lily climbed in. "Be kind, pay attention, and remember I'm here when you come home." Lily repeated it back every time like a small ritual. "You're here when I come home." Adrian noticed that his daughter no longer asked who would pick her up, or who would help with homework, or who would sit with her if she couldn't sleep. She already knew the answers. The not knowing had gone out of her, and something settled and certain had taken its place. One evening he came home earlier than usual. The house was quiet except for two voices drifting from the library. He stopped in the hall when he heard Lily reading aloud, slowly, sounding out a difficult word, and then Cora's voice, gentle, telling her to try the whole thing again. He leaned toward the doorway and looked in. Lily sat on the carpet with a book open in her lap. Cora sat in the armchair beside her, listening with her whole attention, correcting a word here and there, then telling the girl to read it once more. It was such an ordinary scene that most people would never have thought it important. But Adrian knew something now that he had not known a month ago. Ordinary moments were what built a childhood, not the vacations or the private schools or the expensive gifts. Moments like this one, someone listening while you read, someone reminding you to sound out the word again, someone sitting in the same chair every evening so you always knew exactly where to find them. He stepped into the room. "How's the reading going?" Lily looked up. "I got most of the words right." "She did very well," Cora said. "She just rushes when the story gets exciting." Adrian smiled faintly. "I used to do that too." Lily closed the book and looked at him. "Did somebody listen when you read?" The question caught him off guard. He thought for a moment. "My nanny did, Eleanor. She sat in a chair a lot like that one and listened to me read every night." "What happened to her again?" Lily asked quietly, though she already knew. "My father decided I was too old for her, so she left." Did you get to say goodbye? Adrian shook his head once. No. Lily looked down at her book, then back up at him with great seriousness. I'm glad you didn't send Miss Cora away. Cora looked at Adrian, and Adrian looked back at her, and in that moment both adults understood that the child was not really talking about the past at all. She was talking about the future she had been afraid of, the one where the people you loved disappeared without explanation. And she was telling them in her plain way that the fear was gone now. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, there came a soft knock at the door of Adrian's study. Come in, he said. Cora stepped just inside. Lily's asleep, sir. I wanted to let you know before I turned in. Thank you. Adrian hesitated, then turned the framed object on his desk so she could see it. It was Lily's drawing, the three figures holding hands, which he had quietly taken from the kitchen and had framed. I thought you should see this. Cora crossed the room and took the frame in both hands, the tall figure in a dark suit, the small figure with two braids, the woman in gray between them holding both their hands. She had seen the drawing before, taped to the refrigerator, but framed, it looked permanent, recognized. Sir, she said, not quite sure what she meant to say. Can I ask you something, Miss Bennett? Adrian leaned back in his chair. Why did you stay that night, the fever? I asked you once and you told me about your own little girl, but there's more to it than that, isn't there? Cora was quiet for a long moment, holding the frame. When my daughter was small, she said at last, she got sick once badly and I had to work. I couldn't be there. A neighbor sat with her, and she was all right in the end. That wasn't what took her, that came later. But I never forgot the look on her face when I finally came home. Like she'd been waiting and wasn't sure anyone would come. Her voice was steady, but it carried years inside it. So when your Lily woke up sick and crying for someone, I just couldn't be the person who didn't come. Not again, not ever again. Adrian was quiet. Then he said very quietly, thank you for being the person who comes. Spring came slowly that year. The frost retreated first from the edges of the driveway, then from the gardens, then from the wide lawn behind the house. The bare trees put out small green buds, and the morning air no longer hurt to breathe. Inside the Vance house, the windows were opened more often now, and the rooms no longer felt sealed and silent the way they had all winter. Change, Adrian had learned, rarely arrived all at once. It arrived in small, ordinary days that slowly became a different life. On a Saturday morning, Lily and Cora knelt together in the garden, planting flowers. Lily wore gardening gloves slightly too big for her and kept getting soil on her knees. You pat the dirt down gently, Cora said, guiding the small hands. Not too hard or the plant won't have room to breathe. Like this. That's right, everything living needs room to breathe. Adrian watched from the terrace with a cup of coffee going cold in his hand. His phone sat in his pocket, full of messages and markets and people waiting on him. He did not go inside. He stood and watched his daughter laugh at the dirt on her gloves and watched Cora pretend to be very stern about a flower that had been planted slightly crooked. For most of his life, he had believed that providing a beautiful house was the same thing as providing a happy childhood. He knew better now. Later at breakfast, Lily looked up from her plate. Daddy, do you remember when you made me choose a nanny? Adrian lowered his newspaper. I remember. You thought I would choose one of the 5 ladies. I did, but I chose Miss Cora, Lily said, as though this were a fact that needed to be entered correctly into the record of history. Yes, Adrian said, you did. That was the most important choice I ever made. He felt something tighten gently in his chest. I think you might be right about that. Cora turned slightly at the stove but did not interrupt. She had learned that the most important moments in a family often happened in quiet exchanges at kitchen tables. Lily slid down from her chair and brought over a fresh drawing. It was the 3 figures again, holding hands, but now they stood in a garden full of flowers. The tall figure still wore a dark suit. The small one still had 2 braids. The woman in the middle still wore gray. But this time, above the 3 of them, Lily had drawn a small house with a single yellow square glowing in one window. What's the light? Adrian asked. That means somebody's home, Lily said, so nobody has to be scared. Adrian looked at the drawing for a long time. Then he folded the newspaper and set it aside completely. When I was a boy, he said slowly, I thought a house mattered because it was big and expensive and impressive. I thought that was what made a home successful. He looked at his daughter. But a house is only successful if the people inside it feel safe when they fall asleep and safe when they wake up. Cora carried a plate of toast to the table and set it between them. That's what my mother used to say, she murmured. She said a child doesn't remember how big the house was. They remember who was there when the lights went out. Lily nodded seriously, reaching for the toast. I would remember if Miss Cora wasn't there. That night, after the child was asleep, Adrian walked through the hallway and paused at her bedroom door. Inside, Cora sat in the chair beside the bed with a book in her lap and the soft lamp glowing beside her, in exactly the spot where she had sat on the night of the fever, long before anyone had given her a new title. "Miss Cora," he said quietly from the doorway. She looked up. "Sir." He shook his head slightly. "Adrian," he said. "When we're not in front of the staff, you can call me Adrian." She looked surprised, then nodded slowly. "All right, Adrian." He looked at Lily sleeping peacefully, the rabbit tucked beneath her arm. "She chose the right person," he said. Cora looked at the child, then back at him. "She chose the person who stayed." He nodded. And standing there in the soft light from the hall, with one small lamp burning in a child's bedroom and a girl sleeping safely inside it, Adrian Vance understood something he wished he had known many years before. Some people are hired to work in a house. And some people, if you are paying attention, turn out to be part of a home. The difference between the two never appears in any contract, any salary, any report. It shows up only in the dark, on the bad nights, in who comes when a child calls out and who does not. His daughter had seen that difference at 6 years old, when 5 accomplished strangers stood in a line and smiled, and she walked past every one of them to the old woman in the doorway who had never once left her alone. And this time, for once, the adults had been brave enough to listen. That, in the end, was the whole story. Not a story about wealth, or hearing, or who was qualified on paper. A story about a child who told the truth long enough that the right person finally heard her. And about a man who learned, just in time, that the people who stay when no one is watching are the ones who change your life.